Audio test. Crystal can't figure it out.
No,
She's gonna watch online.
Yeah, I did, I gave you all that last year.
Hi, how you doing?
Just
Just
send you a barrel to see.
been on one of those mornings where they haven't run it. That's right.
We need to ask you something.
I know.
It's real pretty.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
It is old work from the lawyer too, so you know this stuff goes.
No, I don't want to. I don't want that.
Sounds good to
You
me.
don't know if it's out, you know, the ones, you know, he didn't have any. I'll ask her.
Hello, Peggy. I haven't seen you yet, so just say hello.
Seriously.
Sorry, everybody else.
Good.
Good morning, good Monday. Monday morning.
We'll go ahead and get the site committee started here. We are going to make a change. The SSC presentation, the contract discussion will be first, and then Don Shell and Brian with the facilities go second. Okay? All right, Matt?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Matt Cooter. I'm the Regional Sales Director for SSC Services for Education. I appreciate you taking a few minutes to listen to our presentation this morning, and certainly I'm ready to answer any questions that you may have. Let's see here. I know that this guy is wanting to work right now. There we go. There's me. Valen Emery may join us. He's on the way in from Lexington this morning, but he got tied up north of Knoxville in some nasty construction traffic. So we'll move on without him. Can you back me up on? I'm sorry. I'll just use you. You're more reliable than that. So several of you all know me. Hal and I have been talking for about, 6 months now about the custodial services program here in Cleveland City Schools. And through our discussions, we talked about several key points, and they basically come down to these 4 main points: safety, training, staffing, and employee engagement of the staff. And then probably the most important piece is the accountability piece, the management and leadership of the program. And safety for us is priority 1, just like it is for you all. And that means a lot of different things, from safety training, making sure you have right protocols in place, making sure that we employ the right folks, make sure that we do the proper background checks, so knowing who's in the facility, but also making sure that they know how to do the right job, how to use the tools and chemicals properly. Training, having a specific K-12 training program that is job-specific training as well as safety training. And then staffing, having the right number of staff, making sure that the folks are engaged in their work. The Gallup poll tells us that about 14 to 17% of our staff, not just us, but any organization, is actively disengaged. So they're working against you every single day. So our job is to make sure that we minimize that number if possible. And then having the accountability programs, having the right management staff, having the right standard operating procedures, having the right quality control procedures, and certainly training that we discussed. SSC, some of you all know who we are. We're a Knoxville-based company. We've been in business for over 50 years. Initially, we only did custodial services, and now we do custodial grounds and maintenance services. Since 2010, our revenues have increased, as you can see there, over $542 million. We're owned by the Compass Group, which is the world's largest food and hospitality provider. So they've given us a lot of resources over the last few years, and we've grown significantly. So all those numbers are great up there, but in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see that the blue circle, the 98% client retention rate. That's the most important number on that sheet. I'm not sure why that's a small bubble, but it needs to be a larger bubble because that's the most important one. That means we're taking care of folks, and that's why we've been able to increase our revenues dramatically. Through the discovery process here, talk with how we've determined that this is the right staffing for the Cleveland City Schools. We're going to have 52 full-time equivalents. We're going to have more employees than that. It's actually 58 employees. 49 are going to be full-time employees and 9 are going to be part-time folks. They're going to be supported by 2 on-site managers. All they're going to work with, those 2 managers, are the Cleveland City Schools. We'll have a day manager and then a night manager, and they'll cross paths in the mid-afternoon. And that's designed to make sure that we're taking care of folks during the day, making sure that we're able to follow up in the evening and button everything up before everybody goes home at night. All of these folks are supported by our startup and transition team. So when we first come into a job, the most important piece is making sure that we effectively start it up or transition people. So that's the hourly folks that are here now. We're going to talk to those folks, but we're going to talk to all the building administrators to make sure that we understand the plans of the school district, make sure that they have a good understanding of what our plan is. And this Excel spreadsheet you see, that is just a small snapshot. That thing's about 4 pages long, has over 160 processes that take place. So our local management team is supported by our startup and transition team that will help with onboarding, help do all the various tasks that it takes to start it up. And the most important piece with those individuals that come in with our managers is to make sure that we have effective and open communication. And certainly they'll be working on a daily basis with Hal, conversing and communicating, talking about everything that's going on throughout the school district. And certainly if you all have any questions as we go through here, Hal said, keep it quick. And so if you have any specific questions, just raise your hand and I'll hopefully be able to answer those. Our K-12 specific training program, it's made up of several facets. All companies say they have a training program, but most of it's just really on-the-job training. And we absolutely do some on-the-job training, but we've got classroom training, we've got online training for our associates to include technical and safety training modules. We have a safety arm of our company that reports directly to the president. The gentleman that may or may not show up here today, they don't report to him. They go straight to the guy at the top. So when they come and do an audit here in Cleveland City Schools, they have no reason to slant things towards our side. Their job is to make sure that our operations are as safe as possible for the students and staff of the community. We've got chat training or weekly minders that keep certain subjects top of mind during key points of the school year. In the last year, we started our Safety First 365 program. We did an analysis and we learned that 40% of our accidents happen with first-year associates. So that tells me we weren't doing a good job training. And we've got this program that it's a graduated or stepped program that identifies new associates. So when Dr. Dyer is in his first day, he's got a red card that he carries with him. So when his supervisor comes up to him or the company president rolls into town and he sees him working down the hallway and he has a red card, he knows that that's a very new associate within the first 3 months of their employment. And they'll ask him certain questions related to that card. And they'll sign the card, and 2 months later, he'll get a yellow card, and then he'll graduate to a green card. And that process has reduced our first-year associates' workers' comp claims by 35%. So it's been pretty significant for us. And then SSC is SIM certified. That's the Cleaning Industry Management Standard. We're certified green building with honors. We're certified nationally. That just means that we've got a program in place that meets their standard or the ISSA standard. It's pretty detailed and very difficult to do. Next slide, please. Our quality assurance program. So this is part of that accountability piece that we talked about. We've got the 2 managers that are dedicated on site. And when we start the program, we'll do an initial benchmarking of the Cleveland City Schools. So our startup and transition team will go through each school and they'll take a snapshot, a lot of photos, a lot of notes, and we'll prepare a book to provide to Hal or Dr. Dyer, to all of you, so you can see, hey, this is where we started. And then we'll start measuring consistently. So daily, weekly, monthly inspections, and we'll provide all of that information to you folks, and certainly sit with Dr. Dyer and Hal in joint quarterly review sessions to talk about, here are the things we did this quarter, here's the amount of training that we've done, here are the challenges that we see going forward. And as a part of that, there'll be staff and administrative team feedback. Years ago, we had an old log book that we threw in the teacher's lounge. We're not doing that anymore. We're using electronic format. We call it the electronic log book. So it's real time. If a teacher or a building administrator has something, they log something in, and our management team gets it immediately. So it certainly takes out some delay in that. And all of this is K-12 focused. The software that we're using to measure this stuff is called Cleantelligent. And the standard that we're using is the APA standard. APA standard for K-12, or the universally accepted level, is APA level 2. It's significantly higher than where your level is now. I think Hal said we're anywhere from a 4 to a 5, depending on which building it is. And so there's a lot of work for us to do during the summertime. Next slide, please. Beyond the paycheck, we're going to pay, I think the employees are going to make a little over $10 an hour here initially. And I mentioned that engaged employees are very important. So that means paying them the right wage, offering them the right benefits. So health benefits, vision, dental, all of those things are available. Retirement plans, all full-time associates get a small life insurance policy that is company paid. They don't pay anything for that. And certainly you can see some of the well-recognized names on the right-hand side of this slide. Those are partners that we've dealt with in the past, but we have a discount marketplace where employees can take advantage of different discounts offered by different companies, which is very important. One of the examples that we use, I think, is AT&T. We get a discount on cell phone bills. Val, that's his most favorite thing to talk about because he's got a family of 5 and all of those cell phones, you know, that stuff adds up and they get a significant discount. So we do those things to try to keep our folks engaged.
So Matt, what's your turnover rate like with your employees, the retention rate? Because that's the problem is all these companies have these great plans, but it all boils down to that person in that building.
Absolutely.
And so, if you have continuity of a good person, but then you lose them in, a year, you have to start all over again,
So industry rate, depending on where you look, they'll say 200 to 300%. I think last year ours was about 58%. And another important piece of that is in 2020, our average time to fill a vacant slot was 8 days. So that's pretty good when you consider you have to go through background checks and all of that. So it's important, and those engagement pieces are very important. Right wages, the right benefits, the right training, and the right tools, having the right equipment to say, hey, I'm interested in doing a good job here at Cleveland High School, but I don't have the supplies, or my machine's broken that I use to do this or this, and they get frustrated and they're like, well, I'm not interested in doing a good job anymore. Yes, ma'am.
Will you be hiring local people?
Absolutely.
Or will people be coming in? Okay.
Well, some folks will be coming in from outside. Initially, the management team will come from outside, unless we identify somebody here immediately that that we would like to put in that slot. We've already got at least one of the managers already slotted for this, assuming that you guys vote for it. We've had somebody that's been interested for some time, if we've ever picked up an account locally. If for some reason you guys decided not to do something, then we've got a county down south of here that we just picked up, so we would move them down there, I guess. But, and that may not be a secret, we just picked up the Hamilton County Schools, so that's a pretty big deal for us. But how that affects you guys is we're already gonna have a large startup and transition team in Hamilton County. You will benefit even more because the division president is gonna be down there frequently and just 20, 25 minutes away. So he's got a meeting in Hamilton County tomorrow, and if we need him back here tomorrow, he'll be here tomorrow. Actually, we're gonna wait and try to meet with Hal after this meeting today to talk about the initial transition process and what that looks like in terms of onboarding the current associates that are working here now. And I guess I really need to touch on that a little bit because you asked about local employees.
Yeah.
We'll interview or talk with as many building administrators as we can to talk about the folks that are working in their facilities now. Hey, who do we want to keep? Who do you guys want to keep? Because I think that's very important. We want to keep as much institutional knowledge that we can and the good folks that we can and improve their work ethic and their ability to work. Yes, sir.
So I'm glad you mentioned the Hamilton County startup, because that's important to know too. I guess my question would be, because you are starting up with them, if you're chosen for us, how do you ensure we get the level of attention that we need and you guys don't overcommit and stretch yourself too?
Sure. So we're over a $600 million company. We're probably going to start up $50, $60 million in business this year. So that's not really a stretch for us, but the concentration of expertise is going to be close. And so your startup and transition team will be totally autonomous from that group. So it's not like we're going to share, but if we needed extra, the extra is local, semi-local, I mean, it's down the street. Yeah, I get you.
Another question. You say they're starting out at $10 an hour. What can they anticipate that they could go up to?
That depends on the individual. So if we had hourly associates that were interested and certainly capable, we could put them in our management trainee program.
Okay.
And
That's
then,
available for them.
yes, and our parent company being Compass Group, it's the 5th largest employer in the world. They could branch out and do any number of things within the company structure. Again, if they were willing and capable of doing those things.
I've got one more question.
Yes.
I'm sorry to ask so many. What about substitutes? I mean, if people get sick, like we've had this pandemic and everything, and you do not have people to come in, do you have substitutes?
Yes,
available?
we'll have a substitute pool. We're not sure what size, it'll depend. We'll overstaff this summer to make sure that we have more than enough folks and that we can get our quality level to the standard that we want. And then we'll have a substitute pool available. And if certainly folks that, the few part-time folks that we have want to work extra, they can. But we'll have folks available for that to fill in when needed. And that's part of it. I mean, our employees get paid time off as well, so we'll have to have a substitute pool to take care of those situations as well. Any other questions on that? Go ahead and slide. This is the detailed pricing. Actually, our price is a little bit less than that. We've been fiddling with some of the numbers, and it's right now I think it's about $21,000 less than that. But those numbers are there if you're interested in seeing what's what on the detailed side of things. How do we need to go into that very much, or?
I don't think we have to go into the breakdown.
Okay. And then certainly we're a qualified partner. We've been in the K-12 business for a long, long time. Many years ago, before Compass purchased us, we did custodial services for all types of facilities, regional shopping malls, industrial facilities. But since 2010, SSC is totally focused on education. All those other segments of our business are now gone. They've shipped off to other branches of Compass Group or been sold off. So SSC focuses exclusively on education, both K-12 and higher ed. Safety and security, as I mentioned, is priority one. We're going to have a local, completely dedicated Cleveland City Schools management team of 2 individuals. We're going to raise the standard to ABA level 2, having the proper staffing to reach that level, having the transition team to make sure that we onboard folks and have the right processes set into place to make this successful. We're going to measure this at the very beginning and consistently measure it through the life of the contract, and certainly have the equipment and supplies available to completely and effectively take care of the job. So at this point, I would ask if there's any other questions regarding the program.
Dr. Dyer, do we still have those employees who are employed through the school system rather than through the company that we're using?
We do not. We have no employees right now that are currently Cleveland City Schools employees dedicated to cleaning
Okay,
services.
my custodian was employed.
Right.
So that
Right.
was employed, and I didn't know whether we still had some, what their relationship
Right.
was.
We do not.
Anybody else? Matt, when Dr. Denning was director of schools and I was assistant principal at the high school, you set a high standard, I thought. I was very, very pleased with you, and I hope it'll be that or more. Because if I ever had a problem, I could just, Jerry Lash was great. I remember Jerry, he would just take care of anything, because I think it's so important. We got good facilities. When we have visitors at the high school, elementary, you only get that one chance to make a first impression.
Absolutely.
The hallway's got to be clean, bathrooms, and, so you said, my dealings with you and Dr. Dennings, I know Don knew him at the time, it was very, very good. So hopefully maintain.
Our program's just gotten better. I'll say that.
Yeah.
And the individual, you all will get to meet Val in the coming months, and he is top notch. And that's all I can say about him. You'll be super impressed, and I think the program will be great. And you'll probably get tired of the amount of communication that we have available to you. You can take as much as you want or as little as you want of that communication, and we'll set that up through Dr. Dyer and Hal as to what you guys receive. But I think you'll be impressed.
So just to let you know where we are, I spoke with Chuck Cagle at the TOS conference last week. We sat down and went through the contract, and I know the SSC attorney and Chuck Cagle now are going into the high level parts of the contract are out there. Now we're getting into the detailed, use of words and things like that that go into contract negotiations. So that's where it is. I think the 2 attorneys are going to meet hopefully sometime soon, probably by phone. And the desire would be to have this contract to you at our board meeting next Monday. Now, I would want the contract in your hands well before then so you could read through it. But that's hopefully where we're headed.
Al, got anything to add to it? Thank you. Just we're waiting on the lawyers to finish up then, hopefully we'll get that
Right.
maybe Monday, or when is it, the 5th?
Jonathan reached out to Mr. Cagle on Friday afternoon, and hopefully they'll be able to meet. Jonathan's not able to meet today, but hopefully in the next couple of days they'll be able to have a phone conversation. And from our part, it's much easier to get those individuals on the phone together and work out simple issues.
I would want to get the contract to you no later than Friday. Of course, we're closed Friday for Good Friday, but we can still shoot you an email as soon as we get that. So.
Anybody else? Thank you, Matt, for coming.
Thank you all.
All right.
Okay, facility plan discussion, Don Shell from Community Tectonics and Brian Templeton.
I'm going to let Don.
Don, go first.
Good to be with you. What we'd like to accomplish this morning is to review with you what we've already done, sort of some of the information we've shared with the central staff. And so that's the reason I thought it'd be good just to visual let you see some of the things. We'll also put that on the slide. You want to go ahead and start that, Cody, if you would mind. I tried to do it both ways, but again, I felt like in our meeting with them, it's always good to see information all at once, so we can start trying to, because we asked them to make some specific decisions. We started by just sharing with them what the purpose was. You assume everybody knows, But it helped me when we met with Mr. Taylor and Brian, we sat down and we discussed with Hal some of the issues with the capital improvements plan that you already have, that you did last year. And we wanted to see how that was going to tie to the process and to the information we try to do. And we learned several things on kind of what we think is the priority. And enrollment, you got some issues at the middle school. The high school, you may think you've got adequate space, but as Hal relayed to us, there's some issues there, mechanical, sewer problems, other kind of things, that if you start to spend money there, should we not know what the plan is on the future? So we're going to try to open the door a little bit this morning and kind of talk about that. And we said, and I think this would almost apply to you today. We all need to have a purpose. We're not going to force a decision. That's not my prerogative to do that. We're going to provide some information and try to get some feedback about the opportunities you have to go in the future. But we shared with them some specific information on student population. I've met with Michael Carr several times. We've had discussions. We've talked about the information he had. I took that information and created enrollments. You can see over the left-hand side, I'll show these on the screen in a few minutes, but we looked at several ways to just kind of determine where the students are as best we can. If you look on there, you remember from the report, capital improvements report, if you go back and look at the enrollments for the past 9, 10 years, it looks like you're going to have another 800 students in 10 years. And you remember that number? So the question is, where are they? I mean, but that, are they all going to be at the high school? Or are they going to be spread out through the elementary schools? What happens to each individual school based on that? So that's what we try to do is calculate as best we can. And honestly, I like to think about projections still, students, it's kind of like weather, just predict often and you'll probably be pretty good. But so, y'all took a long time to do any projections, but they are projections. I hope you understand that. But I think what I hope to do is give you a perspective of a range that could happen. Does that make sense? And then establish a planning model. What should be the model for the future of the amount of students that's going to flow through the system at each grade level? And then we said, okay, let's come up with these options and then try to prioritize those. So we're going to walk through those a little bit with you, just that information. I keep forgetting I can look at that too, so I like this deal. That's pretty good. Maybe I should say that. We also told them, please, let's have a non-purpose. We're not going to talk about cost. We're not prepared to talk about cost of every option we think about. That just takes away from the focus. We're not going to talk about staff, the utilization of the classrooms. Hal showed me this nice document you've had that's already been through that shows all the extra support areas. So that's one of the issues you have. I'm going to talk about classrooms and student projections. We have not totally analyzed how many spaces are going to be needed for support area. You've got a document that says for elementary school, this is kind of what we want to have. And so that's still to come. That'd be our next step. Brian and I will go and Hal will go. Hal and I have talked about maybe how that process might be a little bit different since he's already done this, but we're going to try to make sure we visit every school, talk to the principal, and find out how the building's been utilized, take that information and apply it to the information we've already created, and hopefully that'll lead us to some reasonable solutions. Let's flip to the next one, Cody, if you don't mind. I'll just do a quick thing. I'm going to show you some quickly. Here's a yellow one. Flip on to the next one. That's the cause of the COVID. Michael and I talked about maybe we need a couple of different ways of looking at it. You look at just what it would have been if you didn't have COVID, and now what it would be if it was. And then we did another one next COVID. We had one that I'm calling the green right now. That just helped me to remember when I looked at these things. I was getting confused which document was which. But this was the average of all the schools, if you took all the individual schools. So after that, then we did enrollment projections for every school individually, 2 or 3 ways. And with that, then I still wasn't quite concerned, or still concerned exactly where I might be. So we took every one of those and calculated individual grade level projections. So if you think about it, you know today you've got the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. What numbers are going to flow into that 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th in 5 years? you could back up and look at those, or you could even go back to kindergarten and say, now kindergarten, here's what the numbers are there, and there's a range. So what does that tell us? Well, you could say, well, we got priorities, we've got limited amount of money. What's our priority? Should we deal with the middle school? Should we deal with the high school? Should we deal with the elementary school? We know everybody flows into the middle and high school, which is a good thing. So if you look at the red, what I've tried to put in there is to show you that's where the number exceeds 600. And so you could say, well, if I've got 600 elementary school kids in kindergarten, what's going to happen? Where are they going to go? Are they going to flow through? There's going to be some migration. There'll be some come in. There'll be some leave. So that's all you have to do is try to project as best you can what that's going to happen. So if you look at that number and you go back up, even that'd be for 2035, you can look and see there's 500 and something, and a lot of those numbers even for 2025 or 2030. So that started leading me to think about maybe what I should share is to say, is it not reasonable to look at this a different few ways, but maybe look at a planning model? Let's flip on, I can't remember if that next slide's a planning model or not. If that's what it was, is we said, okay, one option would be to have 600 students per grade level. And that's kind of what I showed on this, let me slide this over here. Just kind of hold this a minute so you're not bombarding with too much stuff. Is initially I took that and said, well, we'll try to look at the number of classrooms we're going to utilize. Now those numbers you've got right there, bear with me, they're different. That's after we did this, and there's a reason for that. Not much, but it's the options aren't different. It's just I go back and talk to Michael, and he said, well, we had attendance zone change in 1920. Maybe I'll do a projection for that and see how that works. So we keep working on this. I also know that the city, when I talked to Greg Thomas at the city, he shared with me several things, and he said, oh, but there's going to be an area in the city that's maybe going to have 500 houses. I said, no, it'd be nice to know that. Where's that going to be? I didn't get an answer exactly what that's supposed to be yet. We're still working on it. And but there's also census information about birth rates and things. We probably ought to test that. But for where we are right now, I think this is a pretty good way of kind of looking at it and saying, let's test this. If we have a K5, 6A, 9, 12, that's one of the options we proposed. And then we looked at each of those in terms of what happens at each school. And that's what this is. I'm going to talk about that a little bit further. But the first scenario is that because of that attendance area, some of the elementary schools have got more capacity than you got students. And then you look at the middle school and it says, it's 1397 today. And some say, maybe 1400 is the maximum capacity. I'd like to verify that a little bit, but because I know we've got 20 classrooms in every wing of that middle school. 20 classrooms times 25 is 500 students. That's 1,500 student capacity. However, back when we designed that building, there was a lot of support area, resource, CDC, there was learning, even talk about having a five-member team, one of them being reading. And so that still has to be determined what impact that has. If we've got 20 classrooms in each wing, we may not be able to use all those for academic classrooms, right? So we have to make that decision, what could happen there. And that leads, well, how big could that building be? And can it be added on to? What are the other options if there's not enough room in there? When I talked to the city, they told me, well, you might need to know that we're going to expand the highway all the way from, which would impact Candy's Creek all the way through town. I said, well, it'd be nice to know what that means. I said, I remember we had trouble figuring out how to get off that highway into the school. And I know what our options are, so we still don't know that yet. But again, back to these options, I think those are still valid. And we kind of tested that with the schools. We told them, you've got, I showed them some of those numbers that you're looking at there prior and said, here's what would happen in each school and kind of the numbers of each school. And so we took those and said, okay, now we're going to have K5, 6A, 9, 12. Option 2 would be a K5 instead of a K, I'm sorry, 6 through 8, but a K5, and then have a 7th and 8th grade. and maybe even have a sixth grade independent area that might even could be like an academy for the middle school, but you'd have an area close to that, or it'd have to be a separate building somewhere else. Then we looked at it and said, well, what if we had a 5-6? So we looked at the enrollment numbers for a 5-6, and so you got two options, or several options there, and said, we don't want to impact the high school, other than just probably adding space to the high school over time, whatever that needs to be. And if you look at that, if you can see those numbers, if you have 600 capacity, if you have a 5-6, you'd have 1,200 capacity. If you have a 6, 7 through 8, you got 1,800 capacity. In a high school, you'd have the 4 times 600, 2,400. And again, I'd remind you that is student capacity. And you remember Hal did this on the other report, says, well, what's the optimum capacity? Because we both feel like in our conversations that probably 90% would be the maximum, or at least the optimum capacity. So you'd have to have a building 10% larger to accommodate a little bit of flexibility. Does that make sense when I said all that? And I told Hal, I thought maybe in my experience, 85% is probably the best capacity at high school for people I've talked with across the country. Looking at it, it's just hard to calculate high school. Have I always appreciate the high school people scheduling. I'm amazed at how they schedule classes. I still haven't figured it out yet. But it's but at the same time, in the middle school, you've got planning periods and you've got chances of classrooms being empty part of the day. So does that play into that? Yeah. So rushing on through, we did those options, and I showed you how we said, here's what the building capacity be, the planning capacity for the students. You're going to have about 7,800 students, maybe in about 35, and that means you'd have to have a building capacity of about 8,800. And so those are the planning numbers I'm looking at here, see over here. And those are just information, so you can see these numbers are the same, but what happens in option 1, you get the traditional, what you've got now, K5, 6, 8, 9, 12. Option number 2 is K5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12. And K4, 5, 8, 7, 8, 9, 12. Those are the options you could have. We actually said, well, what about the fourth option? We said, would you consider, at the high school, consider maybe ninth grade academy? Only because they could be still on the same site, but maybe the classrooms, the way they're organized, if we're going to redesign it, maybe that could be maybe that'd be worth considering. We did that in Johnson City. They moved their ninth grade back to high school. We debated a long time what that looked like, and finally the numbers were the cost. They had to move it into high school, but they had a separate area. It wasn't. I had a separate administration entrance and so forth. We're not suggesting that's what you would do here. It's just an option we thought about. So what happened? Brian and there, I didn't realize this until I got back home and started looking at this. There's some discrepancy in these numbers. It's always a little confusing when people, you give them the freedom to vote. You should have the same number in all the options, but you can see option number 1, you got 13 votes. Option number 2, you got 11 votes, and option number 3, you got 13 votes. So I probably didn't explain it real well because we got a little confused, or I may have made it confused. I had this chart down here, and we decided this is not really an option because what I asked them to do is tell me your preference. What that blue means, that's what I prefer. That's my preference number 1. But we didn't say you don't like what I said. Then now give me a preference number 2, and that was the green. And the least desirable for you would be yellow. And so that's what we did. It's interesting, and you might turn as I comment if you want to. On the back of that, there's one single sheet. I've got the big sheets, but Aaron took some pictures. And Brian actually typed them up for us if that'd be something you'd like to have. There was a lot of pros for the standard things you had for years. The K5, 6, 8, 9, 12. You can see it was 6 for first preference and 6 for second. So each individual would have 4 dots, so they could vote, a blue, green, blue, red, and yellow. And I probably didn't explain it well enough so I could, or it probably been more even votes all the way across. There was thoughts about high school. There seemed to be some suggestion ninth grade academy would be worth considering.
Okay.
If you had K-5, 6, 8, 9, 12, probably 12 out of 13, so that would be reasonable. Again, I didn't test if you could live with it. What the overall was is just a quick way of trying to convey to you, this is some of the thoughts that the central staff has. And that provides Dr. Dyer with some information too. The K-5 with just the sixth grade seemed to be questionable. And you can look at some of those pros and cons, and I won't take the time to go through all those with you. But they would help you understand what they think the pros were for each phase, or for each option, and what the cons are for each option. Does that make sense? Okay. Cody, would you mind flipping? Let's see, Will. So each of these then, these are back to, I'm going to skip through these quickly. I've already spoken to it, but this is back when on the right-hand side, you see the numbers that kind of relate to some of the things that Howard done. Flip on over, and I tried to put some use of classrooms, the number of classrooms, and test that against the planning model of the 600, and came through those. Let's flip on the next. After the meeting, again, that's another one. Go ahead, we'll talk about that one. Okay, after the meeting, it's a little bit different. So this one I talked to Mr. Cars is, I said if I were a board member, I'd like to see the numbers of all those somehow in a matrix. And so that's what that is. You take each school, again, you look at existing enrollment, the number of existing classrooms, and for example, I don't know how to read them far, but 14 classrooms would be used, just so I try to figure out how many classrooms you now have. Hal had done that once before, a couple of classrooms in each, like Arnold was 2 classrooms, I think, grade level. I tried to look at that and say, what could the maximum at 90% be? So I've got the maximum at 90%. The objective would be, is to look and say, if I have 90% available space in all my elementary schools, what is the capacity I would have? Does that make sense? And what that number, I probably look at 2,500 or something, I think it is. Then that number says that's what the projected option, and so you can compare that now with the yellow numbers, which are again a range. Those are 4 different years, goes all the way from 20 up to 35. It tells you what the projection was each of those years for just straight through enrollment. The next one would be the COVID enrollment, and then the third one was that without any attendance. We took out 19 and 20 and see what those numbers are. So then you can start comparing then what I need to get mine because I'm having a hard time reading that quick enough to keep pausing on it. But maybe I could stand here. But see 24 to 2,500. What I did is take the high and the low, just say that would be what the range would be for the elementary school, and that one it could be 2420 to 2,500, so 29 to 3,200 over in this other one. So how does that stack up? If we go back to our planning down at this point and say, okay, that number is 2,578, we'll need to have projected K-5 building capacity. It needs to be that number. What do we have? Projection. We're projecting 3,000 to 3,200 by 35, 3,200 to 3,550. And so you carry that all the way down and you can see the shortage in K-5 student capacity will be about 1,000 students by 2035. Yeah, not totally scientific, but it shows ranges and helps you maybe decide what kind of capacity you might need for those. Let's see. Yeah, and it's got the K-5 and then the building capacity. That's the planning capacity, the building capacity. Let's do the next one. And you carry that all through again to the 6th grade. You got the same number of places up there. It's a way of just testing that planning model of 600 per student per class, grade level, I'm sorry, and see if over time, and hopefully it'll help you see, well, if I only got so much money, what do I do first? And where's the critical, and what's going to happen? Can I get by for, let's say, 7, 8, 10 years if doing nothing in elementary schools? what's that chance, what would happen? So those scenarios will help you see that obviously at K4, we relieve some of the classroom issues in the elementary schools if you had a 5-6 grade. Does that make sense? So that obviously does some relief. The elementary or the middle school always stays the same unless you do a 5-6 and take it out. So anyway, it's just a way of helping you see. That's why I decided to print those out so you'd have those. Let's go to the next one. And again, I won't try to bore you with all those numbers. I just wanted you to see the work we've done to try to give you the options. We still think that the 600 per grade level is a good planning. You just have to decide what's the best organizational plan. You know, and that's not my prerogative. We had that decision made 20 years ago to have this, but things sometimes have to change. And what is the logical way of doing that? It would help us if you would think about this and then try to decide what is the best organizational plan. How do we feel about sizes of schools? You know, you look at the size of schools, I've tried to give you what I think is the capacity based on the use of those classroom spaces. I still think the middle school is one of those questionable things about how the space is used to create the capacities, but I tried my best just to make assumptions. If you go to that next one, Cody, is again, you've got 60 classrooms, and I said, okay, you've got 48 numbers utilized, just assuming. So if you've got 48 classrooms, and if y'all remember, well, I know you know, but may not remember this, but you should probably do, is the plan at the time was always to have no more than 25. Even though 7th and 8th, you could put 30 in a classroom, the planning model was to have 25. So you have to kind of help me decide that too. That's why I put down there, and some of the places, if you go back and look at the individual schools, it's got, 18, 16 classrooms per grade level. One, it's 25 at 6, 7th and 8th is 25, but there could be additional capacity. So I want to remind you could have additional capacity. Always comes back to the 6th grade though, how you keep the same capacity in the 6th grade as you have in the 8th grade if you've got different PEP requirements. Okay? So again, I didn't think you'd want to go through a lot of explanation about that. I just want you to know the different ways we've tried to estimate and project the student enrollment to test that numbers, and you all can help me decide if that's the right numbers. Or again, I think it's information I can give the city, and we can talk about as we go through and look at other impacts in the city that might impact that. Mr. Cars and I have also talked about it'd be nice to know where the folks are. So I think we finally got the city to agree to take the attendance zones that you have. He's got that data, but they're going to provide the mapping to allow us to put the students on the map so we can see in those attendance zones where the students are. I'm not sure exactly what that will tell us, but I think it'd be good to know that as we think about, things you do at each school. If you're going to try to make additional efforts at school, what that might be after we get through the next phase. I think that number might help us. I know I went through that pretty quick. I promised Dawn and I would do it quick as I could. I just want you to see what we've done, understand. I think the important thing is to read those pros and cons so you can see, because you'd probably do the same thing, and we could have done that with you. You'd probably come up with a similar list, I suspect. The tough part is now decide how many of those options and which options you want us to pursue as we gather more information. I mean, because again, ultimately, cost will start impacting. That'll be our next step once we get the utilization of each of the schools, find out how the support areas work. Then we'd know you need additional classroom additions to each of those elementary schools to support. What do you need to do at the middle school? What are our options? Same way at the high school.
First of all, you did a great job. I mean, you did a lot of work here, a lot of information. I'm impressed. Thank you for doing all that. Dr. Dyer, the people voted were just in the AOB, right?
Correct.
I just wonder if we had all the school administrators get their input, see what they were saying, the principals, assistant principals and stuff like that. I'm just kind of curious because the administrators at Cleveland Middle School have always talked about Maryville City system because it's similar to one high school and middle school, and they took the 5th graders out of elementary in 6th. Were you involved with that? Do you know anything about it? I've heard a lot of good things about it because Seems
When I
like
visited the school, I know what they
it
do.
took fifth graders away from elementary and sixth graders from the middle school, right?
Yeah.
And then intermediate school,
Mhm.
Oak Ridge has that.
They do?
Well, their middle schools are 5th through 8th.
oh, really?
There's different setups all across the nation
There is.
for all of this, and depending on what body of research you read, one way is just the, best things in sliced bread, and the other is the worst, but it depends on what you read, so I think all those options are viable options, it's just a matter of which way the board feels is the best way for us moving forward as far as that goes, and you're right, these are just what we have up there. Our principals and APs are pretty busy right now with everything going on school, so we decided just to meet right now, the first step, with system level, folks in our office, just to get, a general ballpark figure about what people think. But, that's what you see here. But, I would really be curious what others think, including you, as far as this goes.
Other questions?
Well, I'd like to say that Don did this for us in 1997 or 8, somewhere along there. It's scary how accurate it was. I mean, you look back at that and you go, wow, that happened, and the enrollment. So when you look at these dates and you think, oh, 2035, it's not gonna be my problem. But we are setting the roadmap for, whomever is in Cleveland City Schools and goes to school here, works here, is on the board. And the work that Community Tectonics does, and Don, he's got a lot of experience doing this, and he's done it with a lot of school systems, and so I think it's really incumbent, Chairman Cogdill, that we study these numbers. There's a lot of information on these pages right here, and I think that'd be very helpful.
Well, I commend Hal too, and the work he's already done. He's helped me a lot to understand quickly the issues, and you or Brian need one comment if you want, because you heard me talk through the other meetings. I don't know if I left something out. But the thing that the other difficulty we're going to have, I say difficult, is merging now. At the same time we're planning the schools and stuff, we're trying to merge all the good information he provides you on the issues of other capital improvements that through those other sources of funding. Again, if you look at the high school, 3 or 4 systems up there, all of them have different years of life expectancy. So how do you do that and plan that with the way you're going to have to why replace a mechanical system if, Brian's worked on a couple of things now that we need to have a renovation or we need to tear something down. Those decisions need to be made now, before that takes place. Again, if you look at funding, I've heard we need something at the middle school somehow to solve that. So either there's some kind of addition there, or there's a new school that's a 5-6, possibly. Well, that's an expenditure. There's expenditure at the high school. So we got a hefty project, and then Hal's going to come back and say, yeah, but how long is the mechanical system going to work over here before? Also, could be some money in here for this HVAC, because if it's going to be 10 years before I can get this funding, then let's go ahead and replace it. Does that make sense, Hal, what we're saying? Because that's the thing I think I heard you express to me is, what does he do on the maintenance side and the repair side, and what we do in the planning? It all goes together. The Mark Bill in Houston County, it's a simple thing, but it always reminds me, we did planning over there. And we got through, Mark said, I was getting ready to spend $30,000 to put this canopy on the side of the building over here. And now I realize that's a waste of money because we're going to renovate that and change all that in the next 5. So that's a simple thing. I think it's a bigger issue at the high school from what Ryan shares with me about a sense of urgency. And I know you're trying to work with a lot of urgencies right now. The Ezra stuff too is now on your plate. So but anyway, we're going to try to help bring that together as best we can, but it's still a lot of effort to tie those two together.
And just 2 quick things I would say. One, just like we did with rezoning, I think we're working with facts. And facts go a long way. And the last rezoning we had went really smoothly, I thought, because the board relied on facts and not emotions getting involved and not just opinions. Opinions are important in this course, but we really relied on facts to move us through that. So that's what we're doing here, that lays out that roadmap. And the other thing is dealing with COVID. you know, there were only 9 school systems across the state last year or this year that so far have showed growth in student numbers. Usually that number is a lot more than that. And even the ones that showed growth weren't a whole lot of growth. We are down a little bit here, and other sister districts in our area are down. But we have to believe, and we truly believe, that next year we're gonna see a influx of kindergartners coming in and others coming back, but we won't know that until we know that. So we have to plan for that and just see what happens. But that's where it makes it tricky as far as looking at numbers. But I think you're right. I think it is safe to assume Cleveland's not gonna get any smaller. You know, folks are moving here. I went out driving around yesterday just because I haven't done that in a while. I just looked at new growth, new neighborhoods going in, new building projects are popping up all over this place. As far as, I just went and looked at housing projects. So it is interesting. I'm sorry, Peggy, you had a question.
Now, I just wondered, looking at these projections of numbers, does that consider possible annexation, and how does that affect us? I know we're not allowed to have it and annex any areas unless that subdivision votes for that,
Right.
but
And I
they
addressed
might
that.
possibly do that.
If you don't mind, let me address you what's going on. As contractors, the city council has now required you to be in the city of Cleveland to get Cleveland utilities. So that's no longer an option. So what that is causing is we have developers buying property on the edge of the city and have an annex. Turkey Road is 500 homes. Right by where Dr. Dyer lives is 150 homes. We analyze everything coming from the city getting annexed. And that's the tricky piece, because we don't know on growth, that's hard to trend.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Don's talking about running the problem. We can trend past numbers, but the amount of growth we've seen in the last year is probably 800 homes going into Cleveland just through annexation. And when you go out to the edge of the city, we've got houses going down on Chattanooga Pike where you never would have thought. And these are $300,000 homes being built, and they're $300,000 spec homes. So we have a lot of growth that's being annexed in that we really won't necessarily be able to project. And they're sold as soon as they go on the market. So I do think that there's an aspect of this that I think the numbers he's showing are excellent. I think there's an aspect that we won't be able to tell how much it's going to affect us until we really have the city, which is trying to develop a plan, you know.
Perfect example of that is going up North Lee Highway, the Pratt development there, Heartland, it was in the county. But it's right, right by that market there, now they're in the city. They requested, the city can't annex anymore, but they requested, that's what they did there.
And that's it, they're requesting to be in the city, and if they want Cleveland utilities.
Well, when you annex, if you annex an area and there's a school already there, do you get the school? Is that part of it?
No, I don't think we can.
No. Nice try.
I guess you'd have to buy it, they might be willing to sell it.
Well, we have 2 county schools in the city right now.
Yeah, that's true.
3, oh, the high school also, that's right. You know, I think it might not be a bad idea for us to consider looking for property. It takes 7 to 10 years to build a building and get people interested. And I would hate to see us get in a predicament, kind of like we faced on North Lee Highway, where the owners wanted a mint for the property, then they wanted us to build a road and all of this kind of stuff to access the property what being used. So as this property is being sold, maybe it would be a bad idea to start looking while property is still available in the city to build a city school, such as out by the YMCA. There's a nice attractive property for sale that's in the city.
Yeah. And I do think that, and you guys can speak this more than I can, but I think that goes back to the options up there about which way the board wants to go as far as this, because if you picked option 1, for example, that would mean expanding current facilities and not necessarily building a new one. Whereas option 3, you've got to do something a little different because now you're adding in a 5-6 school. So you would need property at that point, or use existing space at one of our sites.
Some of our schools are kind of landlocked, like Mayfield. I don't know how you could
You
expand
could,
Mayfield.
you could.
You can only go up again.
Yeah, you can
And
only
that's not
go,
possible.
only go up. That's right.
Only Candy Creek, and maybe the middle
Candy
school.
Creek.
Brian did advise me that, and I think he's come with, we could add about 6 classrooms at Candy's Creek.
Right.
Yeah.
And that-
The roof line is designed for that, you know, what, 60 in each wing there?
Yeah, and it comes down to what Don hit on before, thinking about what size school, you know, and kind of coming together and saying, okay, we really are looking at, you know, a certain limitation to the middle school. And so if that's the case, and we know that there are challenges doing something at the middle school side, you know, do you add more traffic to it, you know, given that you're gonna lose some roadway as part of the road widening? So as an option to dealing with that is either stay in the traditional model, build a new middle school, or a way to get around that is to look at this 5-6 concept, which would start to pull students there. So I think what Don was requesting is that you all start to think about how we solve these problems, you know, given this information and seeing what that growth is gonna look like over the course, then what strategies do you implement to be able to handle the growth, you know, big picture. You know, and at the high school, you know, we've got all these projects that are kind of in the works to deal with things, and we've thought through those with the idea that, you know, big picture, we know that you all are gonna wanna stay on that side. So how do we collectively handle situations, you know, with an overall master plan to add growth, you know, to revitalize things, to reprogram things? So I think we've talked about that's where this thing's heading at the high school. You know, how do you take all that information and develop a, you know, plan that you can make decisions, you know, along the way with an overall goal? Here's the direction we're going.
And I think, go ahead.
You know, you can't find much property in the city that you could build a school on, but it's being a county. Would the city consider buying property in the county in anticipation of this growth that we're going to have? Because I keep hearing more and more people moving to Cleveland.
I can tell you what we dealt with in Carnival when we did this, and my recollection is we had to look inside the city.
That's
That
what
was
we
my
afraid of.
recollection, unless that land was annexed in.
Yeah, and you
But
can't
Things
find the
changed too, and
finances.
my memory may not serve me correctly on that.
Well, and
There's not any.
you'll see it in some of the pros and cons as if you read through the things that we discussed at the previous meeting, but you get into situations as far as traffic, you know, if you're a parent that has students in multiple schools, what's the sequence and the distances between schools, you know, that needs to factor in.
Yes.
One thing, correct me if I'm wrong about this, Don, too, it will help them to know what options you just don't want to consider. If there's options up here that are not even on the board for, you know, as you a member to consider, it'd probably be good for them to know that so that they don't look at those potential options. So I think that's part of this too, is ruling out things so that they don't spend their time on options that would be something.
If you decide that there's something we hadn't thought about,
You know,
Ryan mentioned, we discussed this just briefly, but, or it crossed my mind anyway, that you could have 2 middle schools. But I don't know I kind of threw that, you know, wondering what, because you're going to have to build a new middle school somewhere else, so why not relieve the space by having a 5-6? You know, there are a lot of middle schools that are 5-8. But you all didn't have to decide how big do you want your schools. You don't have any choice on the high school, but on the middle school, you know, at some point in time, is it better to have 2, you know, 1,000 student to 1,200 student schools versus one that's 1,800?
Athletic facilities come into play
It
too.
does.
And so when you're buying land, you know, if you're gonna build a middle school, you gotta plan on those athletic facilities being
That was a
part of
good
that.
thing Maribel told me about the intermediate school.
Yeah.
The only athletic facility you gotta have is for PE classes, and that's a gym. So you don't have to build no football, no softball, no soccer, nothing. And that's a smaller piece of property you got to buy for an intermediate school, because you don't have to have outdoor athletics.
Right. And something that is not building wise, but programmatic wise, and this is something that I want Dr. Elliott to later down the road, once we get more into the discussion, just to think through, but I'll just put it out there now. If you went a 2 middle school route, you'd have to duplicate both programming, so health sciences and health sciences, engineering and engineering. Finding teachers to do that would be problematic. The more students you do have at a school, the more programs you can offer because you have additional staffing that goes with that. So that's just something I would throw out there. I'm not ready for a full discussion on that. I don't have my facts straight yet on that, but that's just something, as we get into these kind of things, you gotta think through what kind of continued programming we wanna offer at these different levels and how you would do that if your staffing changes in different places.
So what's the outcome that we're seeking today?
Well, I think from my perspective, and it's just me talking, because we haven't really gotten into this a whole lot, I'd be interested in just hearing feedback on what options that you like and maybe the ones that you really don't like. And I don't know if we're prepared to do the color game today with
I got
that
some dots.
or not. But that would help, I think, in, helping our architects figure out what's the next level of planning here.
Charlie could get a straw poll, just ask him about it.
Who voted on the other?
So that was system level AOB folks, supervisors,
People just
directors, and those kind of folks. I didn't pull principals into this, not because I don't value their opinion, just they were busy that week and when we met. So we can always do this at an administrator's meeting too, if we need to, but in the end, it is your decision to make as far as what we do here.
So
They all
Don,
seem to
option 1,
prefer-
2, or 3 is what we're looking at there.
Yeah.
So they all seem to prefer what it is already.
Well, the folks
Status quo.
that talked, well, yeah, I would say that. but-
Option 1 or option 3?
Option 3, and I will just say, status quo can be comfortable sometimes, but it may not be the best option for us. But it could be, and that's something to look at. I would say,
That means in the middle school though.
I wouldn't pick an option personally just because it's the way we've always operated. I think this is the chance to think and to be creative or stay the plan. But really, it's
You want us to do a straw vote here?
No.
Can we take a look at this? That's a little more detailed than this before.
Yeah.
and this is not committing you're not
Oh.
committing to anything.
What do you
It's
think?
just an opinion.
What is your opinion?
You want to know my opinion, or do you want
Yeah.
to straw poll it first?
Yeah.
I'm always willing to share my
Okay,
opinion.
we
if
always
you
give
really
it
want
a pretend of it or not.
My personal opinion is option 3 is one that I'm interested in. This is just initial opinion. I've not looked at data in depth or in detail yet, but I do think there's merit to look at, opening space up in our current elementary structure with a K-4 plan. And then middle school would be grades 7 and 8. That would open up a whole lot of space there for the administration at the school to be really creative in staffing and what they're doing. And then 9 through 12, we are in pretty good shape over there at the high school overall, and we think we would have some space to grow. But that would mean building or reutilizing one of our buildings, whatever we do with 5th and 6th grade in order to meet that need. So
I might have one suggestion. I listened to y'all talk, is the next step for us is to visit each of the schools.
right,
And certainly the middle school would be critical,
right.
I think, to try to understand. As we talked about, we might even need to be more in depth there a little bit. But maybe we could just share, and I'll ask your all's opinion too, maybe just share with each of the principals when we visit that we're considering these 2 options. And that we'd probably get a little feedback. But what if I go to Ross or Yates, we're thinking about making this a K, well, they already do a K2, 3, 5, so, but you could get some opinions that Arnold or a Blythe-Bauer or something. What if we made this a K4?
Right.
Or we may keep it a K5. What are the needs you have either way?
Yeah.
I don't want to complicate, I told Hal it complicates our job more, the more options you have, the more farther down the road. But I'm sensing that maybe from the board's perspective, it'd be nice for you all if you all had not only this group's opinion, but maybe got a little bit of feedback. You might have some principals saying, oh no, I don't want to do this, you know. But I think ultimately the thing I like to do is called consensus, is kind of like this. Consensus is I may not agree with it, but I can live with it. All right, that may not be my preference,
Yeah.
but that's still a good concept because it works. So it sounds like you'd have still two possibilities, even though we know limitations are physically, is what the middle school is. It could mean something different building wise, probably, if you decide to go that way, either 5K or 2 middle schools.
Question for you. The current Cleveland Middle School with all the outdoor athletic facility, how many acres is that?
I think it was 30-something acres, as I remember.
That much?
Yeah, because we actually used that flood area and built a football field and a baseball
It's in
field.
that type of
Okay,
plan.
and then
I may be wrong, but that's just long.
if you had an intermediate school with no outdoor athletic facilities, is that half of that, or would be 15 acres, or? I'm just looking at, because like, see, Peggy made a good point, the amount of land in the city. That's why I kind of like the 5th, 6th grade school, because you don't have any outdoor athletic facilities.
Well, we'd like to say an acre for every 100 students or so, plus the basic of 10, 15
How much?
acres, so.
36 acres. 36
And
acres
there's
for the middle school.
30 to 40 acres with to get parking, athletic facilities and everything else.
A lot of that, the current middle school though, is that trail. You gotta remember a lot of that is
Yeah. The walking trail,
the
that walking.
walking trail and that's
And-
floodplain.
And you would have to remember too, a 5th and 6th grade school would be fairly large.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
We're not
saying.
talking about a small number.
But you don't have outdoor athletic
No,
facilities.
no, but just space wise.
20 acres maybe?
Yeah.
Would
Yeah,
busing
my-
be a problem if you went with option 3? That's what I think about, because you've got buses going to 3 different
We
grade
would
levels.
definitely have to adapt times and look at, I mean, it
More
would take
buses,
a
more drivers.
And buy more buses.
and maybe not more buses and drivers, they may require time changes. And because you're gonna have to have, especially Nate, said earlier, you have now students at possibly at 4 different locations.
Right.
So you're gonna have to have staggered your times. So we may not have to have more buses, but we definitely would have to look at our times, our bell times and what that looks like.
Yeah, I can tell you, where I came from, and I don't know where it is now as far as start time goes, but they had 3 different start times. We had a 7 to 2, we had an 8 to 3, and we had a 9 to 4 system for what we did with schools. And again, I don't know what they're doing now, but
Well, because now a parent can have 3 schools to drop off and pick up
Yeah.
at, as we are already. You've got-
That'd be the property purchase where you look, obviously, would I be wrong, how, the closer proximity you had to the middle school would be better, because your parents could drop off pretty easy that way. Because you got the community K4, and if you had that reasonably close, the property in some of that area there would be.
Right.
Yeah.
Do we need to do a vote or wait to get more information? Or we
Just
Well-
ask, anybody else want to volunteer their
Yeah.
vote? I mean, it's not set in stone.
No.
Well, I think it could just be opinion. I mean, if you
Yeah.
share with us opinion, don't you think, Don? That way we
So,
can.
we're not gonna tell him that if he don't want us
I'll
to.
get started. I vote option 3. If anybody else wants to.
I like option 3 too.
I'm thinking option 3, if we could find one where we could locate it close to
Yeah.
make things easier for parents and for our busing situation.
But you would save acreage, not having to have outdoor athletic facilities.
Right.
There's a house not too far from the middle school that's for sale, and it really, I've heard that it's going to be torn down, that, whoever buys it.
How much acreage?
I don't know, it's a lot of acreage. I mean, not 30 acres, but, it's fairly large.
How many acres did you say we need?
Just comparison, the school would be close about 30 acres, but you probably get less without that athletic field. 20, 25, I'd say.
I mean, we're required, the school projects, just with the amount of parent drop off, you need more property for stack space and, so it takes a little bit more just to deal with that, and then also the detention, the stormwater, things that need to be dealt with. So I'd say, yeah.
So, you gotta think if we're talking about 600 students per grade, that's 1,200 students, that's
That's the
we're
standard.
almost double what you're looking at for Candies as far as the building size.
Anybody else want to voice an opinion? You don't have to.
I think we ought to look at number 3.
Okay.
Study more.
I say 3 first, and then also don't forget option 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 3 and 1 for me.
Carolyn, Tom,
And then
you
I did have a
okay?
question though. Are we thinking?
Carolyn said three.
Are we thinking if this moves forward sometime after 2025? Are we thinking timeline at all with all this?
We're gonna hopefully put that in as part of the final results. We don't know. Again, it's about putting in the maintenance and like what, I think what we'd like to do is put together a 2025, 2030, 35, prioritize both the maintenance as well as the schools. Once we kind of understand what you want to do and see the impact of each school.
I'm just thinking.
We'd help you,
target
because
dates.
again, I think what you'd probably need to do, I think, is be able to say, I mean, this could be a big number before you get approved. And obviously you got to sell that to the city council. And so we all know that there's limitation in funding over a period of time. So can we identify the elementary schools that need this, the middle school, the new middle school, if that's what happens, this, and then again, you got the high school. You know, what I understand from Brian, there's a lot of issues there. And so you can decide which gets, that'd be your all's decision, which gets priority based on the information we provide you.
So I did have a radical question here.
Radical? Okay.
Have we considered, if we do go with option 3, using candies for option 3 and distributing those students? Is there capacity there for that? Just throwing it out there.
The way some of I don't know if it's the architect, the way those classrooms are designed, is that
They've
an
been
option?
customized for age appropriateness as far as the restrooms and heights and things like that, so there'd be a little trick to get them adapted to, get 6th grade students. I mean, obviously you have a wing that's set up for that, but coming back and dealing with the kindergarten first and the 2-3, you'd have to do some work to get things up to the right heights. And I guess you could get some increase in overall capacity if you went to the 25 students where you're below 20 now for kindergarten first and second, third. So you could get a little bump with that.
Were you thinking K-6 throughout? Is that what you were thinking?
No, I was thinking
Transition that to-
5 and 6.
Yeah, transition.
Well, Nate, what about that school like Stewart, 5, 6, and then it's right in the middle of town and.
Right.
And then you disperse those children, those K4 kids differently.
Well, I was
That's why
gonna
you look at
say,
enrollment and see what the enrollment is, and then once we know where the students are, you'd be able to say, we've got these amount of students, and where could they feed? Mayfield, probably not gonna be a
But Stewart's got, I think you could add on at Stewart.
I think you could.
There's plenty of land.
You got that parking, that.
Yeah, they got a bunch of land out front.
I was gonna say Arnold, because it was discussed many years ago about changing Arnold to a 6th grade school. And Arnold at one time was a middle school, and then it was Cleveland High School at one time. You've also got the gym, which is very adequate. You've also got the football field.
Except the traffic is a problem.
Traffic is a problem, but at the location, you could disperse those children to Mayfield and to Stewart, but you could have Arnold as your 5, 6 school.
Well, I know you all feel this way, so I think I can be honest about it, but you all have always been concerned about the educational program. You compare what 6th grade is getting in the middle school compared to programs and issues you're gonna have in the other elementary schools, it's gonna be difficult to have any kind of equity there.
To retrofit the elementary schools.
I mean, you just think about what they've got there. I'm middle school right now, I can go to consumer science, I can go to art, I got band. I got all kinds I go to that library, I've got computer labs. If you're gonna put the 6th grade anywhere else, where are they gonna get that? Are they gonna be able to have the same programs? Just something to think about.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, the good thing is you don't have to make a final decision. And that's a good thing. This is just kind of a shot over the bow, kind of open up the door to show you what they've been working on and where we are. It sounds like there is somewhat of a consensus that option 1 and 3 are 2 that maybe deserve final or
Sure.
more studies and
Do that.
getting into it more. We don't have to go out and solicit anybody for funds today or anything. It's just a matter of now and, yeah, I'm not trying to stop the conversation, but just now I think it's their prerogative to go out and work on option 1 and 3 and just kind of put it together and come back and report when it's time to do that.
I
Does that sound?
I agree with Tom, though, it'd be valuable to start keeping our eyes open for
Yeah.
property in
Yeah.
the city.
Absolutely.
Because it's not gonna get more, there's not gonna be more. And
Right.
so
It's gonna be
if
more
we have to
expensive.
buy something and hold it for 5 years, 10 years.
Sure.
You
that'd
could
be all
always
right.
sell it.
Yeah.
And always sell it.
Well, this is a public
That's
meeting and
true.
people are watching, so I wouldn't be surprised if some realtors start calling. So,
All right, we need 20 to 30 acres.
30 acres.
We don't know what kind of school we're gonna put there
Right.
yet, but we know we're gonna
Under
need.
$5,000 an acre.
And we're taking donations too, right?
Yeah,
donate-
take donations.
We'll accept all
Anyone who wants to
three.
donate property, we'll take.
Yeah, we've been down that road, and then we got into, well, but I would like it named this, and then I'd like for you to build a road, and then I would like, 14 other attachments, and we want $90,000 an acre for it.
And you gotta build it in 2 years or we're gonna take it
Yes,
back.
so we don't want donations, there's too many attachments.
With no strings attached.
Yeah.
Don, Al, Ryan, thanks for all the work. You did a lot there. I mean, it's,
Thank you.
Enjoyed being here.
Thank you.
Okay, going to number 3 here. Updates on projects for the summer, Ryan and Hal.
I'll let Brian just take this, because he's been handling the bids and the pre-bid meeting. And, we are moving that way. We're having to wait for ESSER funds to be approved, I will say that, before we actually start in some of these projects. And I'll let Brian go ahead and say where we are and the ones that we do have in the process.
I'll just do this real quickly. So, 2 projects that have been out on the street, to contractors, for bidding. And, that is the canopy project that we brought to the site committee some time ago. That's out for bid. We had a pre-bid meeting, last week. We had 3 contractors that showed up. It was a mandatory, all these are, the city wants us to do mandatory pre-bid, so they're kind of a pre-bid meeting. So we had 3 contractors, and we covered all sites, let them look, and give them the opportunity to ask questions. So we opened bids for that project on Wednesday afternoon. And later in the afternoon, we had our pre-bid meeting for the sewer and water improvements at the high school. And we only had 1 bidder show up. That's a challenging project. And I've had discussions with the bidder, and he is interested in the project. I think it's a good fit for this bidder, but unfortunately, because it's a mandatory project and there's no other interest, we don't have that competitive situation that we would desire. So after talking with Hal, we think probably it's not gonna hurt to go ahead and open bids and see where the number is in comparison to what we projected in our estimate. And, we'll report back to you as to how that turns out. But, we knew, just so you know, we did publicly advertise it. It was advertised in the paper. It's been in plans rooms. I personally contacted 6 contractors and gave information. It's a challenging project. We're gonna require them to go in and open up some access points within the floor, and they have to get that material out to get to the sewer line. So, not a simple go in and do it. So anyway, that's that one. The 2 flooring replacement projects are out for bid. The Stewart project and the Black Tower project. So we're actually having a pre-bid meeting for those 2 tomorrow, and then we open bids the following week. So those are all, running according to schedule so that we can get that work done this summer. The kitchen upgrades at the various facilities, the hoods and the dishwashers, engineers have been on site. multiple times. I think I've visited those schools probably 3 and 4 times over the last couple of weeks with different consultants getting in to get information on what needed to happen. So we're actually going to talk to ESG on Wednesday about the possibility of using them as the contractor to put together a bid to save time. I think that was something that the state had recommended. So we hope to get more information, but I guess the thought now is that that wouldn't require to go out to bid, so we can save some time, you know, so that we can get all that work done during the summer. So a lot going on.
Brian, I don't want to name, but the one bid for sewer and water, was that local or out of city?
It is out of Athens.
Okay.
They're currently working in Cleveland on projects that are active now.
Okay.
Anybody else? Questions on the update? Okay, Arnold Elementary road discussion, and Hal, if you could, quick as you can, Ms. Robinson's got to leave here pretty soon. We need to, because we have to do.
Pop that up.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, we can.
Okay. If you can look here, I've got the slide torn down, but it's sideways for all, but this is Arnold Elementary, as you can see. The front area there with the trees, their back parking lot, our parking lot across the street. This is 4th Street back here and 7th Street there. What we are having to do with the kitchen hood is come out through the side. In order to make it code, we have to come through the side of the building. This thing is now going to stick out about 4 foot. Which puts it over the sidewalk, but in a vulnerable area to be hit. So if a tractor trailer decides to turn down that road, or something big turns down the road, they could actually tear that down. Not to mention the safety concerns we've had for years. I've talked to Mr. Chai about, you know, you do get cars that go down that road even though it's next to a school. We really haven't been able to look at putting a canopy on there because that's a public road, and the canopy would hang right at the edge. We would have it knocked off if we put it there, just from experience, if you put those in a high traffic area. So what we're asking you today is to allow me to go to the city, and we would like to close Harrell off from 4th to 7th. There is nobody on that road other than the school system. We would not affect anybody's parking from 4th to 7th. And so we would like to, in order to protect our facilities and make it safer, and maybe make some things available in the future for safety for the kids to have a canopy maybe for those students later on, to get your permission to approach us. This would then, if you say yes, we would then go to the planning commission. There's a whole thing we have to go through to then go to the city and ask them.
So buses do not go down through there?
Buses turn down 5th Street.
Yeah.
And they come in and they turn and they go on Harrell. We could still bring our buses that way. Our biggest thing is that we would be able to put ballards up next to the sidewalks to protect and keep things from getting too close to the building.
Mm-hmm.
So we initially would be able to do that, whereas right now that's part of the street. So we can't do that right now. We can't put ballards. We'd basically be in the street. So we would shift the street a little bit. And then another aspect of this that we need to keep in mind, there's really no good way, with distancing being a big deal anymore, and that kitchen and cafeteria being so crowded, there's really no good way to expand that school as far as the cafeteria. And that cafeteria is very full. So the only way to really expand that school would be to come out across Harrell and utilize some of that parking lot and some of that eventually as well.
Is that a two-way street or a one-way street?
It's one way.
One way, okay.
It's one way. So if we could close off that part of it, it wouldn't affect the houses at the front on Harrell between 7th and 8th. They would still have access. There's someone there with a carport. And there's no homes with any access the rest of the area we're talking about.
Any questions, other questions? Nate or Tom, we need a motion. Give Hal permission to follow up with the city, and there's been some discussions with the city, but there is a process.
There's a process.
Process to go through.
I move forward with that plan.
And a second.
All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? It's three of them.
It's just three.
All right, Al, go for it. All right, number 5 there is update on the 5-year capital plan in regards to track, scoreboards, school buses.
I just wanted to come to you and let you know that we're moving along with the plan that was presented to you. We've had a couple of things occur. We do have the baseball scoreboard in place, so that one
So
has been
nice.
purchased.
Yeah, it does. It looks really good.
Wonderful.
And,
Wow.
so the baseball, we were able to get it up on opening day, so
Thank
we get it
you
working on
for
it.
doing that. Amazing.
The track is gonna be an issue. The track, once we actually got, and Brian was part of this, when we actually brought in the company and take a very close look, and it couldn't have been a better day, it was in a thunderstorm. It was just pouring down rain, and when we took a close look in the pouring rain, what we found is that asphalt is gonna have to be milled at least 1.5 inches. So that took the price of this track repair up at least to probably $200,000 or greater. So I'm mainly coming to you, letting you know that I'll be working with Cindy, and we'll be making changes in the capital plan that we'll eventually come back to you with in October, to update you. And this is what we do this all the time, but I just want to keep you updated that track piece is now going to throw an issue. Also with the track, we have to do the football scoreboard first, because it takes 2 months for the track to cure. So trying to do the football scoreboard and the track during the same summer is, timing-wise, is not possible to make that work. There's always a positive. I hate to get the football scoreboard, come in after we did the track and then tear the track up and have to redo it. So from a construction standpoint, we need to sequence this to where we get the football scoreboard first and work towards that, and then come back and re-look at the funds and how we have the capital plan set up in the sales tax. And that's something Cindy and I can sit down with Dr. Dyer and look and see how to bring that back to you in October. And that's when we always look at the capital plan to make any changes and get your approval. So I just want to update you, we do have school buses ordered. We got 3 buses ordered. So those will be here in August.
So the track will be usable for the next school year?
No, they won't, well, it's usable, they can use it,
Yeah,
but they can't have like a regional, if I understand.
right. You can have regular season track meets there.
But not, okay.
Yeah.
No postseason or anything.
So so we'll need to get the football scoreboard this summer and then work towards the track at next summer. So,
Anybody else?
I have a question, not so much about this, but where are we, as far as looking at what we're going to do with the Denning Center and, this building and other buildings that we might be thinking about?
The Denny Center, we are waiting on getting some feedback from all the consultants that visited the site. Mechanical, electrical, plumbing, structural. We've got preliminary information, but we're waiting on their documented info that we can include in the study, and we should have that early next week. Was our deadline for them. So I would expect that we could have something ready to distribute to you all in the next 2 weeks. We've got a week to assemble it all. But essentially, that would be a report of what our findings were. Okay, what we see as issues that would need to be corrected, resolved. I will tell you this, the report from the structural engineer came back favorable. Just in our discussion, the rusting that was a part of the caustic fumes off the pool that was being sucked through was only localized to a couple of areas. It wasn't across the entire upper roof. So that was less of an issue than I think we thought it would be, initially.
Brian, you wouldn't know this, but is the city talking about an aquatic center? I heard a little bit about that.
Yes, they are. They have put that in their plan,
Mhm.
and they presented that at a city, meeting here, probably 2 months ago.
What's the time frame for that?
That was over a period of 5 years, but I think there's some discussion as to trying to determine when they would actually do the aquatic center.
It's really needed. I think Dalton has one, and it's really helped a lot. Okay.
Where's,
In Dalton.
no, where's they?
Downtown,
Site.
a big part of downtown. And it's also talked about where at Tinsley Park, the pool is up top. We've talked about it up there too. There's been one city council member talking.
That would be great if they did that. That would help a lot.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I will just add, there is talk of an ESSER or whatever they're gonna call it, 4.0 coming. So there could be another round of stimulus coming in. The general talk we're hearing about that is that it would be 100% capital needs. So that, again, is too early to know. I'm just gonna let you know that that's something we're starting to hear a little bit more about. That's all I know at this point.
I took your questions, but I'll ask you that on Thursday.
Okay, architects are gonna be busy possibly. Very, very busy.
Anybody else? No? Right? I think we're adjourned.
All right.
Then I remember.
If there's,
Yeah.